Thank you for coming to this discussion about street epistemology. Today, my guest is the author of Mortgage Hill Musings, Bob Swanson. Your channel, Mortgage Hill Musings, seems like a little more than half the videos you have up are about street epistemology. Is that about right?
That's true. Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us about yourself and about your relationship with SE?
Sure. I guess the short story is I got interested in it. Mainly, I guess I was inspired, I guess, by teaching. I'm a teacher professionally, and a few years back had an experience with a student who wanted to drop my class, and um, and it got me to thinking, because she was a good student. I thought, gosh, what would cause someone to want to drop a class?
Mm-hmm.
And so there were some professional and some personal experiences that got me really thinking about critical thinking, and why people believe what they believe. And then I'm trying to think how I actually stumbled into street epistemology formally. I'm assuming it was on YouTube. Yeah, I think I was watching some Hitchens videos and that kind of stuff. And I think probably saw an Anthony Magnabosco video was probably what started me really learning about street epistemology. And yeah, then I just started. I did a couple of early on. I was just so taken by the process because I guess I've come from the background, as a lot of people probably have, of kind of getting into debates and counter apologetics and that sort of thing. And quite often that's been costly relationship wise, or just it just doesn't work. You can't have an ongoing conversation and realize that there's got to be a better way, and street epistemology seemed to be that way. And it also, it really helped me. I'm fascinated with just why I believe things, and it really seemed to be a good tool to use just for self-reflection. How grounded am I in things that I claim to believe? So the channel kind of just sort of took off from there. I just, as an exercise, did a couple of breakdown videos. I started to introduce street epistemology to other people. I spoke at my local Unitarian congregation, and I worked up a presentation called "Good Grief, It's Street Epistemology." It was a kind of a riff on Charlie Brown. It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and I created a fictional conversation between the fictional characters. Because in the very beginning of It's the Great Pumpkin, of course, Linus is all in about the Great Pumpkin. Charlie Brown doesn't believe it at all. He calls him an idiot, or you're crazy. And that's typically where we're at in most of our conversations. When we come across somebody who believes something that we think is kind of crazy, we say, "Hey, you're crazy," and that's of course the end of a conversation. So I thought, gosh, how could I imagine a more constructive conversation between Charlie Brown and Linus? And and in that video, so it's that video, about half of it is It's the Great Pumpkin. The other half is actually a breakdown of one of Anthony's videos, a woman named Katie that he talked to on the trail several years ago. And it was one of the first videos that I saw that I was really impressed with. I thought, wow, he made real progress in a conversation that was 15 minutes long. He really got her thinking about her beliefs. And he also, that one in particular, really demonstrated the compassionate nature of true street epistemology. When you're really interested in the truth, and you're talking to someone who's also interested in the truth, but you're also sensitive to the fact that a lot of these are very personal beliefs, and when you start pulling on the bottom block of the Jenga tower, that can be quite scary to a lot of people. And I love the way he handled it, and that's something that being a teacher, being a person in authority, if I go there with a student, and this doesn't happen often, but I want to be sensitive to the fact that they're a lot of folks are very invested in their beliefs, and so we have to be sensitive to it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I have a lot of questions that I ask epistemologists, and I'm just going to have her start pulling some of them up at random. Do you do? I assume that you're using street epistemology techniques kind of in a teaching mode, as well as actually sitting down to have a discussion with a stranger. That actually seems like the performative or the thing that we often show on our streams, but it seems as a teacher you'd have a whole different set of opportunities.
Right. Yeah, and actually, I do very little of the one-on-one sitting down with a stranger kind of a conversation. I've only had one face-to-face like recorded, and even that was just recorded for myself. It's not publicly available. One face-to-face interview, and that was with generally a stranger. But for the most part, I do a little bit of kind of Facebook, direct message exchanges with people that I know, that I think that are worth doing. But for the most part, the way I use street epistemology, I suppose, and the techniques are really in my teaching. I've developed a series of lectures. They're kind of critical thinking lectures, and it's all about and then I deploy those during the course of a semester, and see whether that has an impact on the student. So it's not really a one-on-one sort of thing. It's just a matter of showing some critical thinking skills, and quite often I'm the patsy in these in these lectures. So for example, and I'll give one. Actually have a lecture up on my channel. It's called "I Can't Believe I Believe That: Facts and Fallacies in Physics and Astronomy," and it just so happens that I've got a glass of water here.
Yes.
And I've got a CD case. And I don't know if you've ever seen this demonstration before. But what you can do is you can put the CD case or an index card or anything like that on top of the glass of water.
Yes.
Turn it upside down.
Yep.
Let it go.
Yes.
It stays in place. So the question is, why does that happen?
You'd like me to say my understanding of it?
Play along.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm understanding that the water is held in by the lower air pressure inside the glass than on the outside, so it's air pressure holding it up against, and there's probably a little bit of a spring function that's required, so the meniscus can manage to hold the slight decompression required to deal with the weight of the water in the CD case. Is that about right?
Okay. So that was very close to the explanation that I have given for years and years and years, semester after semester.
Yeah.
Essentially it's atmospheric pressure. The skinny is that, yes, the atmosphere pushes, this ocean of air on top of us, weighs down on us with a force of 14.7 pounds per square inch. And so therefore, the atmosphere pushing up at 14.7 pounds per square inch easily holds up that little bit of water, right? But then several years ago, I had a student, as I was doing this demonstration in class, raised his hand, said, what if you had an empty cup?
I can't, did it fall? I'm looking at the screen right.
It falls, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Empty cup, right? And he said, God, if what you're telling me is true, the force of the atmosphere pushing up on this card can hold up a thing of water. Well, it certainly should be able to hold up a cup of air. The air weighs a lot less than the cup of water.
Yeah, how did you get enough decompression for the spring function? Because you got to create a difference in pressure. Something has to pick that up, and I'm thinking that's the meniscus of the water not pulling apart enough to actually generate a bubble. So, surface tension of water.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And it turned, and actually, so you can watch the video.
I will.
I went because I was flat-footed in the middle, in front of a class, a class full of students. I was like, wow. And it not only did it, and I said to the student, I said, Mr. Freppen, I don't know. His name was Aaron Freppen, and I forever dubbed this
Thank
the
you,
Freppen
Aaron
objection
Freppen.
because
Excellent.
thank you for Aaron Freppen. He revolutionized the way I teach because it made me, first of all, seek out a better explanation, because clearly my explanation did not work for him.
Yes.
But it also caused me, and I think at this point this is before I was even familiar with street epistemology. Maybe this is why I was primed to learn about street epistemology, was because I immediately started to think, why was I so confident? How did that idea get in my head that it was atmospheric pressure? I did a little deconstruction for myself. I thought, gosh, I saw this when I was probably 7 years old in Cub Scouts. It was a little magic trick in the Cub Scout manual.
Yes.
And I think the explanation was atmospheric pressure. Then I get to high school, take my physics class, get the same explanation. Go to college, see the same demo, same explanation. So it's that idea that was planted in my head as a child got reinforced. And even when I was as a teacher, one of the most respected science textbook authors, a guy named Paul Hewitt. I've taught out of his textbooks for much of my career. Legend in physics education, same explanation. And so that was, again, repetition and authority.
Yes.
And I had
That's
no
awesome.
reason ever to question it. And it was a great example of, gosh, this is something that I was 100% on.
Yeah.
And now I'm being forced to rethink it. And
yes,
the
I
video
will
essentially
watch the
goes through.
video.
I kind of break it in, and the moral of the story is, there's two interesting things that happened along the way. Is that I went whole hog, because I started to investigate the surface tension thing. In fact, the other good demo that I've got is, you're familiar with tulle, this very meshy kind of fabric.
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the name of it, but I see it.
Yeah,
I see a mesh fabric. Yes,
it's kind of like the wedding. It's like a wedding veil, kind of a thing.
Very good.
So you can put that on top of your glass. Get your card.
Huh? Oh my. Oh, I think I have just learned a thing.
That got me thinking about surface tension.
Yeah.
And in fact, I actually I overcorrected. I thought, well, it's all surface tension. But then I tried it with acetone, something that has different surface tension, and it doesn't work. And so it's in my mind, it's actually a combination of the two. But what was so fascinating was when I went down to our chemistry department to borrow some acetone to try this out, I had to talk to the chair of the chemistry department.
Yes.
And I showed him this demonstration, and he had never seen it before, and he immediately went the direction of surface tension. I thought that's so interesting that we each had our own confirmation, almost our own bias.
Yes.
I was trained as a physicist, and I think macro physics. I think macro scale. I think atmospheric pressure. He's a chemist. He thinks micro scale. He thinks surface tension and molecules interacting. And even two scientists can approach this with different perspectives just because of our own upbringing, our own education. And so this is kind of what I do. This is, I think about these things, and I don't necessarily
this is very fun.
Take the stuff that I teach. I don't take the stuff that I teach as gospel truth. And I try to relate that to my students, is that we should all be questioning. Every day is an opportunity to think about something that we never thought we would have to think about before. So.
Wow. Okay. So, have you tried the acetone on the plain card without the fabric?
Yes. Yeah, acetone won't hold it up.
And what happens in that case? Will not hold it up. It fails, or it does?
It does not hold it up, right?
Oh.
Yeah. So that in my mind, it's a comment, and I could be, I could still be wrong, and that's the nice part. Is I'm still looking for more information and better examples.
That's lovely.
So the more we can model this sort of thing, for students, and especially these things that are kind of, should be commonplace. I think about when I talk about mirages. I think about mirages, and
Yes.
this is an example from my own. I've got three children, and
Mhm.
we were driving a couple of years ago, and one of my sons asked, "Why does why does the road look wet up ahead?" And I said, "Well, that's a mirage. We commonly call it a mirage." And he asked, "Why does that happen?" And I was tempted to parrot the same explanation that I've always given. Do you know why mirage happens?
My understanding is that there's a gradient of density created by a gradient of temperature in the air, and in that gradient you get enough of a different. What am I saying? Density. It's the refractive index. Because you have a gradient of refractive index, you get a curving, and the light curves up through that space. I'm exaggerating radically. And so you go back, instead of looking at the ground, you're now looking back up at the sky from over there.
Right. Yeah. So a layer of superheated air is
Yes.
typically the
Yes.
explanation.
Yeah.
There's a difference in
A
refractive
narrow
index, et cetera.
gradient, a strong gradient, where
Right.
the air here is.
I-
And I would think a lot of
Yeah.
wind would reduce that.
Well, because we typically think about mirages as occurring, in the desert or on a hot summer day or whatever.
Yes.
And so that tends to confirm that
And I think it goes
perhaps
the other way
idea that was
over water,
planted early
right?
on. Well, I'm not convinced that it's that at all, because I've seen pictures of mirages from Siberia at -30. Mirages happen at night when I'm driving along and I see headlights coming toward me. I see those headlights coming out of the
Yes.
pavement as well.
Sure.
And so I'm
Sure.
not convinced
Yeah,
that
a gradient of heat
it's.
does seem easy at night if you have warm ground and cool air above.
I think it has more to do with the critical angle. What makes a reflective surface versus a dispersive surface? I think that's more. I think
Critical
that the
angle
surface
of the
acts more
actual
like a
road
mirror.
surface.
Yes, right. Again, I could be wrong, but this is another thing that I
Yeah.
taught for semester, just as superheated air, superheated air. So I thought, gosh,
Yeah.
I see this at night. I see this in really cold conditions. And
Okay.
so maybe the superheated air is not the actual explanation there. So anyway, these are just
So
examples.
critical angle on, yeah. That's interesting to think of critical. How could we tell the difference? How could we tease that out?
Yeah, because I almost think about the berm on the side of the road, which is like gravel.
Yes.
I don't see a
Okay.
mirage off of there. And yet it's likely just about as hot, right? But it's not as smooth.
Good, different color. Yeah, not as smooth. Definitely not as smooth.
And so the sky, the light that's coming in, is going to get dispersed as opposed to being reflected.
Okay. I got to think about this.
So,
I'm not
yeah.
sure if I can tell how to tell which situation it is, and maybe my problem is that I don't understand the optics of it except at a very superficial level, like a photographer's
Right.
level. Yeah, so I'm not sure if I could tell the difference between that, or if maybe there is some interesting optical properties when you get a narrow, strong thermal gradient in whichever direction at whatever temperature over a smooth surface. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But again, what's interesting about
Okay.
these sort of things is, it's a good approach, but the problem is whether you think that a mirage is caused by superheated air or whether you think it's because of critical angle reflection, you're not going to get kicked out of your house. Your friends are still going to speak to you no matter which side of the and so that's kind of where I do point this out to my students. When I'm talking about these issues. In fact, my birthday's on Sunday, okay, September 27th, and for years and years and years I thought I was a Libra.
Okay.
Turns out I'm not. It turns out I'm Virgo.
Interesting.
And it all has to do
Just
with
on one side of the cusp or something.
I teach astronomy. No, actually, it's the fact that when the astrological signs were set out, the ones that you see in your newspaper, those horoscope signs, that was 3,000 years ago.
back in a Julian calendar, and then things
And the
shifted.
Earth
I
has
see.
that precession of the axes. The Earth, of course,
Right.
is, and so therefore the sun is not in the constellation Libra on my birthday anymore. It's actually in the constellation
Oh,
Virgo. And
I see. So the dates that they have in the newspaper are incorrect for when the sun would be moving through the constellations.
correct, right.
Interesting.
Everything is shifted
Now,
because it's been 3,000 years. So it takes 26,000 years for the Earth to do one full wobble. So we're about 1/9. So everything is shifted about one sign.
Yeah, you were mentioning something about like 88 constellations. I'm thinking of 12 of them around the seat belt, around the equatorial, or maybe I'm thinking not the equator,
on the ecliptic, right? The ecliptic.
Ecliptic, yeah, the ecliptic that all the planets are pretty much roughly into. In those 12, are they the same? Are they close to the same gap? Are they defined in twelfths, or are they of different widths?
Yeah, that's the International Astronomical Union in the early 20th century, because there were so many constellations, so many different civilizations had named different parts of the sky different things, and they had different shapes, and the IAU decided let's bring some order to this. Let's actually define the sky into 88 blocks. So essentially they created 88 states with boundaries.
Yes.
And so the constellations are not just the stars, it's actually that parcel of space or part of our sky.
So did they take
whether we
the
can see a
invisible
star there or not.
constellation and then the next one, draw the lines between, and then it bisect them?
Kind of,
roughly?
yeah, right.
Okay.
Right. And so as you're asking, as far as are they equal or no, in fact, Scorpius, which is a scorpion, only a small little sliver of Scorpius actually intersects the ecliptic. And so therefore, if you think you're a Scorpio out there, you probably are not, because because the sun is only in Scorpius for, it's a matter of a week or so. And so and actually there's 13 actual constellations that are part of the ecliptic. The other one that no one knows of is Ophiuchus. And yeah, and part of the reason why Ophiuchus has never been included is because it's 13. So there's always been a triskaidekaphobia.
If we astronomy nerds were to go out and popularize the notion of no, the zodiac dates are these dates, and here's why. Is that better or worse for critical thinking?
I don't know. It would make a lot of people embarrassed about the tattoos that they've had put on their bodies, I imagine. A lot of good money gone bad there. Or maybe the tattoo repair. But I don't know. But it's like another example of the fact that whether I believe I'm a Libra or whether I'm a Virgo, my family still talks to me. I can still get a job. That sort of thing. So these are low stakes beliefs. Most of us, when presented with new information about it, and I thought I was a Libra for a long time until I started teaching astronomy and I learned more about this, and I changed my mind. I changed my definition. And most of us operate that way. Most of us are able to take in new information, and if it's a low stakes belief, we're willing to change our belief. It's, to me, what's psychologically fascinating is the high stakes ones. The ones that we, even if presented with new information, will resist making a change. That
is high stakes defined by my doxastic closure, or defined by like how many other things I would have to change, because if I change that basis, it would lead to a cascade, or something else.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of speaking for myself, like, as far as, because I one time was a religious believer, or I was raised in a religious household. Eventually I got to the point where I had kind of discarded the supernatural stuff. I didn't necessarily buy the supernatural stuff, but I had kind of taken on the politics. Some of the politics I agreed with, or I maybe was beholden to the religion because of the political stances that the religion put forth. And it's tough to kind of go back in my own mind and even deconstruct what was the moment, what changed for me. But certainly that was, those were high stakes beliefs, because it did, as it does with so many people, it costs you, family relationships when you decide to step away from something that you were raised in, and that there are other people that are, still in that faith tradition. But yeah, no, I don't know actually what we would define as a high stakes belief. Whether it is it is high stakes because no one's going to move from it, or it's a good question.
In that case, I know some people with almost no high stakes belief, and some people with an enormous number of even almost trivially seeming high stakes by that standard, and that doesn't make it right. Okay. Do you find it now? Some of these questions are tuned to one-on-one street epistemologists. So if it doesn't make sense, pass and
Right.
translate to your one-on-a-group kind of thing that you're doing much more. You find it how do you find staying neutral?
It's still a challenge for me. This is when I do, not necessarily in my classroom setting, but like I said, I do occasionally do
online
street epistemology through online, and quite often the people, I don't do it just over anything and with anybody. It's usually, I do tend to target people that I think are kind of thought influencers. So I've had several conversations. My college roommate is a Catholic priest in New York, the state of New York, and I still we still have a relationship, and I still kind of SE him, because I look at him as an influencer, and I find it very hard to remain objective with him or neutral with him, because we have a lot of shared history. I feel like I kind of enabled him in getting into his vocation.
Does that feel bad to you?
It does.
Does that feel negative?
And he's told me that I shouldn't feel. He thinks it's crazy that I feel guilty about it after a couple of decades, but I still do, and it's largely because of the nature of his job. It's not like other jobs. I've had any number of jobs.
Right.
I've switched careers. I was a weatherman for 10 years. And now I'm teaching. I've gone through a couple of teaching careers, and when I left being a weatherman to go into teaching, no one batted an eye. As long as I could support myself and support my family, there wasn't that baggage. When you go into a religious vocation, there are so many expectations. You almost feel at this point, especially for my friend, I imagine that even if he didn't actually believe what he says he believes, he would continue to say that he believes it, because what are his other options? There are so many personal expectations and professional connections, and that's so I feel guilty because of that, because he's in a unique. If I had convinced him to get into accounting when we were in college, and then he at age 50 had a midlife crisis and decided he didn't want to be an accountant anymore, or if I told him, hey, you shouldn't be an accountant anymore, I wouldn't feel the same level of guilt, because transitioning out of that job is a little less difficult. So I find it hard to be neutral in that sense, and also I find it hard to be neutral because what he is teaching, the thing that he believes to be true, teaching as truth quite often to children or to teenagers, I'm not convinced that that's true. And if I were doing the same thing, if I continued to teach that this was because of just due to atmospheric pressure,
right,
despite the fact that I learned otherwise or I didn't believe it, I would be a horrible teacher. That would be unethical to me, as a teacher, to continue to teach something that I once was convinced of and now I'm not so convinced of, would be unethical. And so it's difficult. I've tried to. I created a term for it, is less projection, more affection, when I'm dealing with street epistemology. Is that I try less. I'm trying to project less of my own. He's got his own life and he's got his own viewpoint, and I can't try to put myself in his head so much. I really just have to kind of go from where he's at. But
this is your
it's still a struggle for me. Yeah, it's my college roommate. But I've engaged a couple of ministers. There's a funeral home director that I'm currently kind of in an SE exchange with online. Former friend.
Okay.
And
former friend trying to become a friend
Oh, oh,
again,
yeah, no, yeah,
or
he's
just from normal?
someone yeah, I lived in a certain area and then I moved away, and so we were
I
not
see.
really in touch for many
Yeah,
many
yeah.
years,
Hmm.
and only recently have kind of reconnected online.
Okay.
And yeah, so yeah, in all those cases, because these are influencers, yeah, I find myself a little more tempted to want to change their ideas so that if they're going to be influencers, they influence.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Focusing on influencers does seem a good way to amplify your influence in the world. That definitely seems
Right, and it's just a matter of I don't want to steer them to my particular viewpoint. I do try to
good.
remain
Yeah,
neutral as far as not necessarily disclosing my viewpoint, or if they do know, because some of them, my college roommate does know,
yeah.
but I do really and honestly, and I think a lot of the SE folks are like, if you got the truth, yeah, I want to know about it. I'm just not convinced, and that's the lesson that I learned from Aaron Freppen when Aaron Freppen said,
Hmm.
hey, what about this empty cup? Because he's like, yeah, I want to be, and I love the way he approached it. He was a great student, and I say that, I say, he was truly interested. He had
Hmm.
an example that actually was counter to my explanation, but he
Hmm.
still was of the mind that, hey,
Good
if you're right, I want
disconfirmer.
to
Yeah.
buy it. Yeah,
Hmm.
he wasn't trying to be a jerk about it. But even if he had been a jerk about it, I still
Yeah.
I still was giving an
We should be
incomplete
thick enough skin
explanation.
to not reject somebody's message just from tone.
Right, right. But tone does make a big difference, and so therefore,
It
I
helps a
do try
lot.
to approach my Facebook exchanges. That if you're right, I want to know about it. Let's can you show me how you got what are the foundations of your beliefs? Because if
Hmm.
I can be convinced that those foundations are valid, I'm more likely to subscribe to those as well.
I want to open up to the room. So if anybody is ask a question, you can either type it with a dash, and then I'll have a little thing that allows me to vote it up to the screen. Or if you'd like to be unmuted so you can voice your question, just type something and we'll handle that. So, my next question: are you aware of some of the criticisms of street? Some see it as, or maybe manipulative. If so, do you think there is some merit in some of that criticism?
I just watched the Robert Barron video, Bishop Robert Barron. I think
Bishop
that
Barron, yeah.
I think either Anthony shared it,
Pine
or
Creek?
I'm not sure, or maybe it was Pine Creek. Yeah, I saw Pine
Yeah,
Creek's
I've
kind
seen
of
a couple of
breakdown
them
video
with
as well.
Robert Barron, and Pine
Right,
Creek's the one
right.
that's most memorable to me. But
Right. I saw the original, and then I saw Pine Creek's kind of breakdown of it. And I've actually reached out to my college roommate, as well as one of my
in relationship to Bishop Barron. Okay,
yeah,
I was going to say
just
you
to get
reached
their
out to
take.
Bishop Barron. Jeez.
No. I essentially just sent the link to my college roommate saying, hey, this guy's talking about street epistemology. What do you think? And I've not, and my friend said he would respond. I've not gotten a response from him yet. I also sent it along to a college. I went to a Jesuit university. I went to the
Yeah.
University of Scranton, and still maintain a relationship with a priest who taught me philosophy at Scranton.
Yes.
And so I shot him a link as well, just to I'm really curious to see how they respond to a bishop critiquing SE. I have my own
Yes.
thoughts.
Yes.
I'm very much along the line of Pine Creek, where there's a lot of straw manning that goes on in that Bishop Barron video.
I think it's the definition. I think it's the definition of overcertainty to give a book review without having read the book and admit that you
Yes,
haven't read the book while viewing a book.
right,
Naughty,
right.
naughty.
And actually, it's interesting that you talk about that you just mentioned certainty, because that's
Uh-huh.
uh, the vibe, and again, I don't know if it's because of he's a bishop. I just get this vibe of smug certainty from him that grinds my gears. I tend to spend a lot of my time and a lot of my teaching trying to minimize certainty,
Yes.
or at least question certainty.
Yes.
I'm a musician on the side, and around the sound hole of my guitar, I've put a couple of stickers. I don't know if you're familiar with Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. They were famous for putting slogans on their
Musically,
guitars.
I'm similar. I don't have a visual for either of them, but
okay.
I
Well, Woody
can remember
Guthrie,
what
"This
they
land
sound
is
like.
your land,"
Yeah.
etc. Woody Guthrie, he had "This machine kills fascists" on his guitar.
Yes.
And then
yes.
Pete Seeger on his banjo had "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender." And so on my guitar, my homage to both Woody and to Pete, I've put "This machine," what is it? "This machine surrounds certainty and forces it to think again." So certainty is kind of my target. When people seem really, really certain, are really, really confident, I'm immediately thinking, okay, how could we gauge that? How could we see whether or not they've got good reasons for it? And that really, street epistemology really appeals to me because of that. And there's the blog post that I put on the SE streetepistemology.com website. It's essentially that. I'm giving up certainty for Lent. I talk about my
By
own
the way, there's
experience
a
as the
link
weatherman.
to that in the doobly-doo. You can read
Yeah.
his blog post. It's quite interesting about giving up certainty for Lent and longer.
But it's interesting how certainty sometimes, I wonder if it's in some cases, a professional advantage and sometimes a professional disadvantage. Because I give the example, I was a weatherman, and you never see 100% forecast for rain.
Right.
Whatever. And as a scientist, that's part of the gig, is that you're always trying to falsify stuff, right? And so I'm very open to being uncertain because there are professional rewards for it. It's actually a good thing. It's a positive characteristic for my line of work. And I just wonder what these other people that I'm dealing with, when I'm dealing with ministers, when I'm dealing with a funeral director, they're rewarded for the amount of certainty that they can project. For them, if you're not certain, that becomes a liability.
Yeah.
And so it's just like the chemist and the physicist. We're approaching it differently, and that may be the ultimate reason why I don't necessarily make complete progress with some of my interlocutors. And of course, then that begs the question: well, what is progress? Progress should be just an ongoing conversation and an ongoing examination. I would love to see results. I love the videos when someone does actually say, "Oh gosh, maybe I'm not quite as confident." Another one of the videos that I think Reed's in the room.
Yes.
I did a breakdown video of one of his conversations with a fellow named Dominique, and I love that one, because Dominique came in 10 out of 10, and after he's done, he's at least he hasn't abandoned it, but he's at least changed.
I only
He's
need a
shown some
sliver.
openness. Yeah, right.
I just want to break the adhesive. I don't care for it.
I also talk about another one of my favorite videos from Anthony. I need to go back and do a breakdown of this one. This is a woman named Haifa, who her claim was that she was her mother's daughter. That the woman that she calls mom is her biological mother. Right?
Yep.
I love that one because that's not religion, right? That's just a claim, and a claim that none of us would think to really even question.
Right.
Just like a lot of the things that I've always taught, I've just taught them. I've never even thought to question whether what I'm teaching is actually true. I assume it's true. And the fact that he's able to get her to come down a little bit from her original confidence. It's not like she's probably going to send a Mother's Day card next year. She hasn't abandoned the belief that her mom is her mom. But
right. No,
she's at least learned the tools to actually investigate it a little bit. And man, that's a gift. If I can give that to somebody else, that I should have to be happy in doing that. If I can just model that for my students or with my interlocutors, that's what I need to be consider that a success. If I've done a good job of modeling it or explaining it, then I've got to be good with that.
I'm about 4 sigma certain that my mother is my mother, and probably 3 sigma certain that my father is. and I don't even know if that's reasonably justified. Okay, question from the audience. It's how do you explain SE to someone who thinks it's
a debate?
Yeah.
Well, it's in a debate. You've definitely you've staked out your side and your position, and you're trying to argue for your position and be more eloquent or more persuasive. And that's really just not what SE is. SE is a peeling back. I love that kind of metaphor. And very very rarely it's not impossible to show a little bit of your own position. And I like the SE examples that do that. When Anthony, for example, he'll say, "Hey, would you like to know what my thoughts are on that?" Or in Reed's conversation with Dominique, he kind of, and I pointed out, he gives a little bit of his perspective, because Dominique actually, I love the fact that that it's a real conversation. Then it's not an interrogation. It's not just question.
Right.
A good SEer is sensitive to when they're in a good groove and they have an interlocutor who is really participating and really listening, and the interlocutor might say, "Hey, what do you think?" And that's kind of what Dominique does in that conversation, which I love. Because he's really, Reed does such a good job of really actively listening, and Dominique's doing the same thing. I just, what a good conversation.
Yeah, that's a model. They're beautiful.
So that, so if anybody wants to, what's a debate versus what's SE? Yeah, watch Reed's conversation with Dominique.
Hey,
yes, definitely. Almost required reading. Thank you.
Reed here. Thanks again, Bob, for that video. I really love that. It was such a good video. Thank you.
I need to do more, but life gets in the way. There's so many great.
That's okay.
So many great conversations that I would love to, because I'm not the person out there with the camera doing it, but I certainly appreciate it and like to point out when it's being done well.
Yes, a story about that video from Bob's video of my conversation with Dominique. I think I listened to that video on a hike at Runyon Canyon, and that was the first time I considered the location at Runyon Canyon, listening to that video. And so it was a very street epistemology day, that part of the hike. So that was very nice.
JCC, do you have a question you'd like to voice?
Oh, I was just adding to the debate part of SE. There seems to be a few people, or many more, a misunderstanding that people sense that SE is attacking their belief systems, and it's having some conversations. Some people think that they're being attacked. So, like, how would you go about handling something like that?
Well, I think showing the range of different topics, and Haifa, first of all, you want to make sure that you have agreement, that the person does want to have a conversation. You don't want to just start badgering somebody with questions. So consent, of course, is always key. But then, just showing, having an example like the Haifa, about your own parentage. Was she being attacked for thinking that her mother was her mother? Just by someone asking some questions about it?
Oh,
yeah.
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah, they were looking at entirely as a hypothetical, and hopefully one where it wouldn't matter at all to Anthony in this case. And if it matters to Haifa, we're not asking her to adopt a new, just proportion or confidence to our evidence.
Right.
Yeah, and some people
Yeah.
think that SE is only good for certain things, and it's how would you like explain to some people SE is really a good tool to be used on almost anything and everything.
Absolutely right. I love owning. Again, I tend to use my examples from my own life. Several years ago, I was in a community theater production of Mary Poppins, and I played the role of Bert. And it was production week, and a colleague of mine emailed me, and she said, "I'd love to come to see the show, but Friday night I've got something going on. Saturday I can't." She couldn't make any of the productions, the actual public performances. She said, "I know that you've got sponsor night tonight." It was on a Tuesday. It was like our last dress rehearsal, and it was the sponsor of the show, which was a bank, was allowing their employees to come and see the show. She's like, "Is there any chance that I can come, for this?" And I was like, "This is the first time I've done this. I've never been involved with this theater before. Yeah, call the box office, see if they'll give you a seat or sell you a seat." And I went out. That was like the end of my workday, and I was actually rushing home to get a bite to eat. I was going to head for the theater, and so I get on stage that evening, and I'm singing and dancing, doing my thing, and sure enough, there she is. She and her husband. I see her, out in the audience. And after the show, the director told us we don't do a meet and greet after sponsor night. We can't go out and talk to the audience, which I was kind of frustrated with because during the other performances, you go out and you get the slaps on the back and all that kind of stuff. But during sponsor night, that's really not done. So the first thing Wednesday morning, I get into the office
you put
and I
all
fire
your
off.
attention on the sponsors. Is that the point?
I don't know. I'm not sure what the reason for the rule was, but I did what I was told. And so the next morning, I get on my computer. "Hey Sherry, what'd you think of the show?" And I get a voicemail back from her saying, "I'm so sorry. My son sprained his ankle. We were in the ER. Maybe I can come on Saturday." And I was like dumbfounded because I was 100% that she was in the audience. I was 100%. "Hey Sherry, how was the show?"
Oh, right.
And now she's telling me she's not in the show.
Right. Clang.
And
yeah.
And it's one of the, I thought, okay. And I said, "Thank you, Sherry, for not being there. I can't wait to talk to my astronomy students about this." Because again, I'm the patsy here. I'm the person who is completely wrong. And it made me think, okay, well, gosh, why was I so confident? I was confident because there was a bias in my head. We had this email conversation. I assumed that she was going to find a way to make it to the show. And then I married that bias with really lousy data because I wear glasses and I'm old. I'm up on a stage. I'm not staring at any particular spot. I'm scanning the audience as you're supposed to do.
Sure.
There's lights in my eyes. They're in the dark. I think I see someone with shoulder length blonde hair, and I think there's a guy beside her who's got a salt and pepper mustache. I would love to go back in time and see if there was anybody even close to that resemblance. But I took that bad data, married it to a bias, and boom, 100%. "Hey Sherry, how was the show?" And when she says, she wasn't there. Now, maybe she's lying. Maybe she's lying to me. Maybe she thought it was a lousy show.
Sure.
And she's trying to spare my feelings or something. Yeah, that's a possibility. So I may not be 0%, but I certainly am not 100% anymore.
Yeah. Very much. Probably very close to.
And we could also explore the idea that, well, maybe she's a quantum being. And maybe she can be in both the ER and in the audience at the same time. That's actually a good example of it. That's a non-testable kind of a thing. And I bring this up to my students is that, her lying to me, that's testable. We could actually, I could talk to her and say, "Were you lying about it?" But if I claim that she's a quantum being, well, now I'm in a realm where there's no way for me to test it. And therefore it's a claim that doesn't really have a whole lot of value. And that's from
By
Reed.
making it
Reed says that, and I love that.
All right.
That's all.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can learn or find out then there's not a whole lot of value in the claim.
Do you ever get into situations where you feel that question of belief more harm than?
Yeah, I've had a couple of situations like that, and I've again kind of watched some others handle those. I was in a online conversation with in this case, it was a wife of a minister,
Mm-hmm.
and I was pushing her a little bit. I was asking her, what the reasons for her belief, and you were kind of going down that path. And it was when I was first kind of in street, kind of getting interested in street epistemology, learning some of the techniques and some of the questions. And I didn't feel bad about the fact that she was the wife of a minister. That wasn't or even the fact that she had children. I'm sure she was teaching the children a certain her same beliefs, and that wasn't really a problem for me. And until I happened upon a blog post of hers, she posted something about a miscarriage that she had had, and I thought, oh, this may, now we may be getting into an area where maybe psychologically she needs to believe these things. Maybe this is where it's a good time to just kind of step back and, hey, we can chat about our families and that sort of thing. But I'm not going to probe the reasons for your belief anymore. And that's just part of just being compassionate.
Having
doing
a
no
discussion
harm,
about the afterlife at a funeral or memorial.
Right.
No. Not this week.
Right.
How about not this week? Yeah, don't bring it. Oh, wow. Okay. Question? Is there any kind of claim you would refuse to examine? If somebody came to you with a claim, are there some that you would just say? Besides the obvious, my something just died.
Right. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I like if someone had come to me and said that that my mom is my mother, that to me, initially would be think, oh, gosh, that's too trivial to even. How would you SE that? And the fact that someone has done it and done it very effectively gives me great hope that you can. I think it's applicable to almost anything. As long as someone particularly if someone truly believes in it, if they act on it, if it is something that doesn't indeed influence their actions, I suppose it's probably worth at least doing, at least learning. Well, gosh, why are you so married to the idea? I'm not sure if there's a claim that I would not kind of be willing to go in that path. I'm not sure how effective I could be at doing it.
Okay, so ones where you just might expect it's too loose, too definitional, too unrelated to the reality is to be able to.
Some people really, especially because I teach astronomy. I've some of the people that I've been engaged with, they want to go cosmology. They want to start talking about what was before the Big Bang, and this kind of stuff. And I'm not really super interested in SEing that kind of stuff, or talking about string theory or something of the sort, because again, those are sort of things that they're a little beyond my comprehension. And I'm a physicist, but I'm the dumbest guy in the department here. So when you start getting into quantum mechanics and string theory, it's beyond my ken, and we get into the realm of quantum Sherry. Is she in the ER? It's not something that can really be tested, and so therefore I'm not sure if we could really be honest in changing a confidence. And if that's not really a possibility, even if someone doesn't change their confidence, if there's a possibility of it, it's worthwhile doing a conversation. If there's no way of causing them to change their confidence, then it may not be worth doing.
Okay. My commentary comes back to the end of chapter 7 of Impossible Conversations. Even if you don't change their confidence, might at least be an opportunity to learn how someone from that perspective speaks to help someone else.
Yes.
So that's Boghossian's and Lindsay's justification for engaging with someone who's really strongly.
Right.
Is your teacher?
I agree, because we should be learning. We should be learning. Yeah, exactly. As a teacher, I love opportunities to learn. There's nothing excites me more. And so if I can, have a little less projection, more affection, and by having affection, you're actually walking somebody else's shoes a little bit, and then you learn how they feel a little bit. So,
as a teacher, your perspective is important on this one. Is SE advisable with minors?
I think teaching critical skills to minors is absolutely essential. I think part of the reason why I worry for our society is this inability to determine what's true and what's not true, and these echo chambers of in social media that we find ourselves in, and the fact that when we find information that confirms our biases, it feels good in our heads. All these sort of things are evidence that critical thinking was not taught well.
Yeah.
As children, and people didn't develop these habits and didn't hone these skills, and so then they get to adulthood and they don't have these skills, and then they're easily swayed by conspiracy theories and this and that. So certainly teaching critical thinking skills is absolutely essential. Whether it's I've got 3 children, 3 boys, and I love the movie Smallfoot. If anybody who's a parent out there, if you've not watched Smallfoot, I strongly recommend it.
Smallfoot.
It talks about
animated
Smallfoot.
About a Sasquatch.
It's an animated movie. It's about a Sasquatch. Okay. Yes.
And it's actually about a human in a Sasquatch environment, so it's like roles reversed.
Right. Yes.
Oh, that sounds fun. Okay.
Yeah, and there's
on your recommendation, I will check that out.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Watch it because it's all about questioning. It's questioning. And it's just a beautiful film, nice music. I've watched a lot of animated films, and I don't recommend them to to a whole lot of folks, but this is one that I really like, and I recommend it to parents because I've chimed in occasionally on various Facebook groups when there's been parents asking about parenting issues, especially when they've got a divorce that's gone on, and there's shared custody, and there's variances in what the religious instruction is of these children, and I really feel for those kind of parents, and so I think it's a tool. But as far as SEing, if you're to start interrogating the neighbor's kid, may not be the best idea. Just be a good person. Just be a good person. Be an interested adult when you're dealing with children. Model curiosity and critical thinking yourself, and see what rubs off.
Oh, that's not what. What's your favorite color?
Green.
Green. Oh, Boris is going to be very happy about that. Let's see if this. Have you SE'd anyone who has the belief that the Earth is?
We've had the conversation in my astronomy class a couple of times. In fact, it's interesting. I think teaching astronomy, which I didn't do until about a decade ago, kind of changed my teaching trajectory. Because up until then, I'd been a teacher back in the 90s. I left and I was a weatherman for 10 years, and then I got back into teaching starting in 2010 or thereabouts. And when I was a young teacher back in the 90s, I was a physics teacher. And I thought, I'm lucky. I felt
Mhm.
bad for the English instructor because the English instructor had to make a reading list, and the reading list was going to piss somebody off. They're going to have to defend why they chose this book over that book, right? The history teacher
Yes.
had to worry about, well, what history am I teaching? The poor biology teacher who was in the classroom next to me was having to decide how much evolution can I get in, depending on where I'm located. Whereas as a physics teacher, it's a lot of European white males, in the history. But
Mhm.
what are you going to do? There's not a whole lot that's super controversial in being a physics teacher. I didn't have to decide, oh, can I really teach Newton's third law? Who's going to get mad? But when I started teaching astronomy, then not only did I get pushback over, okay, all right, Big Bang, intelligent design, but also just a lot of these conspiracy theories also kind of hover on the edge of astronomy. So we've done flat Earth a little bit just in class. I've never formally talked about it. We talked about, gosh, how would you prove that the Earth is round and all this kind of stuff. But I do find it intriguing that almost every semester I tend to be presented with a new conspiracy theory, from a student. One of my favorites. I do one of my videos is called "The Ringmakers of Saturn," because a student came to me and said, "Have you ever heard of the Ringmakers of Saturn?" And I was like, "Never. Don't know what you're talking about." And it turns out it was a book written back in the early '80s. A guy thought that the rings of Saturn were being replenished by alien spacecraft.
Okay.
And he wrote a whole book about it. And so I
Okay.
do a whole video about it. Essentially, getting to, okay, why does this guy make this argument? Where does this come from? And is this? It's a kind of a long, involved tale. But it turns out that
Something
this guy, I think, am I still here?
I
This
had
guy
a
was
brief
just a
drop out. I
big.
thought I had to reset. Keep going.
Okay, he's essentially the guy who wrote the book is an alien aficionado and wants aliens to be doing stuff. And so the aliens are replenishing the rings of Saturn, more power to them. And so I kind of go through that, how did this guy arrive at this? Why did he go to the trouble of writing a whole book about it? And more importantly, is there any way that he could actually learn that he was incorrect? What could he do to possibly change his position? And that's, I think, and I have a couple of other examples out of astronomy, whether it's, I flew aboard the Sophia aircraft, NASA's Sophia aircraft a couple of years ago. And some people, conspiracy theorists out on YouTube, think that there is no Hubble Space Telescope, that Hubble is actually located on the Sophia aircraft. And
hey, it's not a bad reach.
And what's interesting with all these is that these people are conspiracy theorists would consider themselves critical thinkers, because they're the ones asking the questions, right? And isn't critical thinking asking questions? Sure, but the fact they're quite often asking questions that they already have the answers to, and that they're asking questions where if they got new information, it wouldn't cause them to change their level of confidence. Well, then you're not a critical thinker. So there's a difference between just asking questions and critical thinking. And I think, and there's parallels when you in religion, clearly. A lot of folks say, well, gosh, we go to Sunday school class and we can ask all the questions we want. But they're very tailored kind of questions. and as long
and
as
every answer is
questions,
Jesus Christ.
and as long as the answers are there, and as long as the questions can be asked, but they would have really no effect on your belief, then they're okay they're fine questions to ask. And in that case, it's
right. As long as they're safe questions, but all the unsafe ones are bad for special pleading reasons.
Right.
Quinn asks, what is your favorite band?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think my tastes range from Old Crow Medicine Show, which is a string band, to New Pornographers. So go from the old to the new, I suppose.
I've not heard of
Neutrality,
either
I
of
don't know.
those.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
But I appreciate the music
and Quinn
question.
says, nice. Okay, so I usually ask Quinn for my musical tastes. He knows more than
I appreciate the music
I'm
question.
kidding.
If I do have a song, I'm a musician on the side. I write songs about science for kids for the most part. But I have a song about my flight aboard the Sophia aircraft. It's called Infrared Set to Go, which you're welcome to check out. I've made a couple of videos.
Where do I get that?
Out there.
Is that on a video?
Yeah, Infrared Set to Go. I made a video for that one, and that one's it's on my first of all my music YouTube channel, which is Stormin Swanson, STORMIN SWANSON.
If you'd be so kind as to put that in the text,
Type
I
that
will
in.
include it in the doobly-doo. Yeah.
Okay. Do that.
And the other one is from Abstract Atheist, who's going to be important in our after show. We'll get to that in a minute. Is it important to bring SE to a wider audience? If so, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, that's definitely important to bring it to a wider audience.
Active. Sorry,
Yes,
sorry,
having
Nathan,
more
I'm
people.
calling you the wrong name.
Oh.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's been brought up. Yeah, I would love to. My wife and I, we like to watch the Sunday morning political shows. We tend to watch George Stephanopoulos on ABC, but I find myself getting more and more frustrated the more I watch them, because I wish that there was an SE training for pretty much all the journalists out there, because all too often the interviews wind up being just kind of platforms for the interviewee to just monologue. They don't wind up being really discussions. They're not conversations, and very little happens. And the same thing happens in like the little round tables. It winds up being kind of a debate, and the real reasons why people believe certain things never get unearthed, never get probed. So I think that would help with our public discourse if more journalists were familiar with street epistemology and techniques of holding SE conversations. Yeah, and I think more teachers. Like I said, to me, SE is really just a repackaging of critical thinking skills, and I think that if more teachers, all schools want to say, oh, we're teaching critical thinking to our students, but the problem is they will
annoy so many parents. Ooh.
There's not really a curriculum laid out to do that, and there's very few metrics. Are we succeeding? And that's actually, I've tried to do this. I don't have enough semesters of data, and in fact, I need to kind of look at my results from the spring. But I use Ben Diesel's questionnaire, which I think you draw a lot of your questions from Ben Diesel's question. I use that as a pretest. I use that as a pretest in my classes. I give it first day of class or first week of class. I shoot it out to my students saying, hey, this is voluntary. Do this, don't do this. It's not going to affect your grade. And then during the course of the semester, I try to pepper in, if I have time, a couple of these little critical thinking lectures that several of them are featured on my YouTube channel. And then at the end of the semester, I do a post test to see, okay, has there been any shift? Has my modeling of critical thinking skills had any impact on my students? And the idea being that my lectures are very specific to me. These are my own personal experiences, things that I've done foolishly in the past, the things that I thought were true and are not true. So it's not generic. You couldn't roll it out to absolutely every teacher out there, but at least it's an example of, what I'm hoping is that it is an example of the fact that you can teach critical thinking skills, or at least model critical thinking skills, and that it can have an impact on your students. You can measure the shift. And and so yes, I think for a wider audience, yes, and the younger the better, because the younger people start using critical thinking, the more years they're going to have that as a tool in their tool belt. And that's important because they're going to be citizens, they're going to be voters, they're going to be parents, they're going to be fellow employees, and so it's hugely important.
Okay. There's been a lot of activity regarding that survey. Vin Diesel and my producer have written programs for online that implement this thing as a web app. And
Nice.
and Nathan has been working really hard over the last week to optimize some of the questions and make them simpler in language and less potentially ambiguous depending on how you see your definitions. And that's been something that's been a brainstorm going on for about a week. And that's actually what we're going to do in our after show today. So if you would please hang out. Abstract Activist is going to take over the after show, and we're going to have this topic. So we would love your input if you've got a little while to talk to us about it.
Yeah,
all of you out there are
yeah.
totally welcome to join us for this after show. Just look in the doobly-doo and you'll see the connection to the Discord where we will do this brainstorm thing about that particular. So that's a real exciting. There's one last question.
I know that there had been conversation. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Good.
No, I'd seen something about kind of an SE curriculum, and there's some people here on Discord that were trying to kind of get something together, and I think I at least registered some interest in it, and then my semester's been so crazy I've really not gotten a chance to follow up. But I'm glad to become. This is my first time really messing with Discord, so I'm glad to have gotten a little introduction to this, and yeah, I'd be happy to try to contribute to something like that. That's a very worthwhile effort in my mind.
Okay. This may not all be visible on the screen, so I'll read it carefully. Nathan asks, I'm wondering really hard right now about radically changing the survey. Is there any good justification for these principles stated rather than asked? Would this survey work just as effectively between two people to spark a good conversation if yes, no question rather than state? Instead of truth is that which best corresponds with reality, is truth that which best corresponds to reality? Slicker than that, but that gives the example.
So rather than using the very confident, the 5-point scale kind of thing,
right? Instead of an agreement, it's well, it might be yes, no, or it still might be a 5-point Likert scale, because you could say yes strongly, yes weakly, neutral, no weakly, no strongly, something like that. Sorry, Likert scale is you break it down to.
So the question is, so ask the question again. I'm sorry.
If Nathan were to propose an example where all of the statements in the thing, instead of being made as statements with which you are strongly agreeing or disagreeing, or however where on the scale you are, asks us questions that would elicit a yes or no. Is true, for example, number one, is truth that which best corresponds with reality?
Right.
That's one of those that we've got 30 different versions of the way to ask it, and we're still working that down.
Yeah. Would the semantics matter? Would it?
Yeah, maybe.
Would it be more likely to give a true response from the? Yeah, possibly. Yeah, because it definitely, to me, just knee-jerk reaction. The question actually seems more like an appeal to me giving at least my opinion and my honest opinion. It seems a little bit more personal to ask it in the form of a question as opposed to a declarative statement that I just need to comment on.
Yeah.
It would be like, chocolate is tasty, or do you like chocolate? There's a slight difference in how it's received, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, part of me intellectually says it's exactly the same thing, and the other part of me does say, yeah, my translators bring it in, or maybe it's more, maybe I take it more personally. Yeah. I don't know. So that's the kind of thing we're going to be doing in the after show, and we need to move to that here pretty quick. I would like to talk about your channel. That's not the right one. In the pre-show, we worked out our backup streaming computer, changed the guest plug on that one, and on the main streaming computer when we backed up to it. Never mind all that. Your channel is Mortgage Hill Musings. The link is down in the doobly-doo. Would you like to tell us anything about that?
It's small. There's not that many videos. Several of them, like I said, are examples from my classes when I've essentially gone through critical thinking skills, and then a couple others are more street epistemology specific. I would recommend, now that Halloween is fast approaching, watch the one about Charlie Brown. And feel free to share it with someone who's not that familiar with street epistemology. I think it is a good. The intent of making that one of the first ones that I made was essentially just, here's what street epistemology is, at least to me, and here it is packaged in this piece of pop culture that we're all pretty familiar with. So yeah, and I need to get some fresh content up there. I've had a video kind of that I've been working on for a long time, or at least thinking about for a long time, and need to get some permissions. There's actually a minister that is involved in this video, and I need to get him to take a look at it first and kind of sign off on it before I put it out there.
It's very important.
Yeah,
appreciate that a lot. Okay, is there anything that we've all the button? I push all the wrong button. Is there any questions that you can think of that you wish we'd have asked?
No, I appreciate this opportunity. Like I said, it's I don't do a whole lot of public SE. It's mostly in my classroom. So I've had the chance to do NanaCon. I was on a panel, SE panel with Anthony had chaired that panel last spring. But beyond that, I don't do a whole lot of public stuff. And this is an opportunity for me to be a little more public, a little less anonymous. And yeah, I've enjoyed the opportunity.
Thank you.
And Dolly, and part of what I you kind of came across my radar screen because you started showing up on the SE podcast, and really enjoying the content. So kudos to the assembling this team that has put this together. You're doing a great job.
Yes. The team self-assembles, as it turns out. In the SE community, it's self-organizing. It's really odd. Little nanomachine. Oh, we could do this. Ooh. Yeah, indeed. It's been a delightful experience so far. Wonderful. If this goes to the SE podcast, I would like them to take this little snippet of words and put it at the beginning. During this demonstration, Bob will invert a half-full glass of water onto a plastic surface, and the water will not spill out. And he will demonstrate it again using fine mesh cloth over the surface of the water so that you'll understand visually what's going on. The audio presentation following. Thank you. Okay. Here are 5 of my favorite SE specific YouTube channels. They are on a list of many that are the promoted channels. If you are really into this method of street epistemology, my favorite place where resources are gathered is at streetepistemology.com. There's all sorts of resources. There's wikis. There's this. There's that. There's ways to get into the Facebook group if you want the social media, or the Discords, or it's all here. It's brought to you by Street Epistemology International, the ones who produce the SEI podcast, which is something that I'm very excited and happy about. The podcast, lovely driving and audio thank you for coming to this discussion about street epistemology. If you would like to be a guest on my show about this or any of the 8 categories that I have of things that are all street epistemology centric, but everything else, my show, I have a category to put you in. And therefore, I really look forward to